Hi third graders. Today is a really big day for us because we are not just going to be reading The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. We are going to be finishing The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. We are on the last 2 chapters of our story. Today's a big day, so listen up. I also wanted to say that I am loving all of the posts that you guys are making in our morning meeting posts on Canvas, and I have so enjoyed getting to see more and more of you on our Zooms. It's been really fun on those Zooms where we have 15 or 16 of you. It's so awesome to get to see all of your faces, and I hope to see even more of you. I want to remind you that our Zooms are on Mondays at 10 a.m. and Thursdays at 3 p.m. I would also ask that if your family has ever had any trouble logging in, or you have ever had any trouble logging in, please try to log in about 5 minutes before the meeting so that if something goes wrong, I'm able to give you the attention that you need so that I can help you get logged in. All right, third graders, let's keep reading. Chapter 25. Technically, of course, he was not alone. Lucius Clark's shop was filled with dolls. Lady dolls, baby dolls, dolls with eyes that opened and closed, and dolls with painted on eyes, dolls with dresses as queens, and dolls wearing sailor suits. Edward had never cared for dolls. Ooh, I'm remembering, third graders, at the beginning of this story, I remember Edward being so upset that somebody called him a doll. Do you guys remember that? And now he's in a shop with a bunch of dolls, and he was repaired by a doll repairman. Ooh, I bet he's kind of upset about that. Or maybe he's grown enough as a character that he's really not that upset about it anymore. I bet we'll find out. Edward had never cared for dolls. He found them annoying and self-centered and vain. I mean, it's kind of like selfish and all they think about is themselves. This option was immediately reinforced by the first shelfmate, a china doll with green glass eyes and red lips and dark brown hair. She was wearing a green satin dress that fell to her knees. "What are you?" she said in a high-pitched voice when Edward was placed on the shelf next to her. "I'm a rabbit," said Edward. The doll let out a small squeak. "You're in the wrong place," she said. "This is a shop for dolls, not rabbits." Edward said nothing. "Shoo," said the doll. "I would love to shoo," said Edward, "but it's obvious that I cannot." After a long silence, the doll said, "I hope you don't think that anyone is going to buy you." Again, Edward said nothing. "The people who come in here want dolls, not rabbits. And they want baby dolls or elegant dolls, such as myself. Dolls with pretty dresses, dolls with eyes that open and close." "I have no interest in being purchased," said Edward. The doll gasped. "You don't want somebody to buy you?" she said. "You don't want to be owned by a little girl who loves you?" Sarah, Ruth, Abeline. Their names went through Edward's head like a note of sad, sweet song. "I've already been loved," said Edward. "I've been loved by a girl named Abeline, and I've been loved by a fisherman and his wife, and a man and his dog, and I've been loved by a boy who played the harmonica and a girl who died." "Don't talk to me about love," he said. "I have known love." This impassioned speech shut up Edward's shelfmate for a considerable amount of time. "Well," she said at last, "still, my point is that no one is going to buy you." They did not speak to each other again. The doll was sold 2 weeks later to a grandmother who was purchasing her for a grandchild. "Yes," she said to Lucius Clark, "that one right there with the green dress. She is quite lovely." "Yes," said Lucius. "She is, isn't she?" And he plucked the doll off the shelf. "I think she's lovely maybe on the outside, maybe not so much on the inside, which is kind of what matters." "Goodbye, good riddance," thought Edward. The spot next to the rabbit stayed vacant for some time. Day after day, the door to the shop opened and closed. letting an early morning sun or late afternoon light, lifting the hearts of the dolls inside, all of them thinking when the door swung wide that this time, the person entering the shop would be the one who wanted them. Edward was the lone contrarian. He prided himself on not hoping, on not allowing his heart to lift inside of him. He prided himself on keeping his heart silent, immobile, closed tight. I'm done with hope, thought Edward Tulane. And then one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. I'm hearing some things that are making me think of foreshadowing, that skill that we've talked about that authors use to let us know that something's about to change. I'm going to read that sentence again and see if you can figure out why I think things are going to change. Lucius Clark, and then, last two sentences, my bad, third graders. And then, one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. The and then part, third graders, is my signal as a good reader that there's some foreshadowing happening here. The author is trying to tell us that something in the story is going to change. There's either going to be a change with one of the characters in their character development, or something in the plot is going to change. I'm not sure which one it is right now, but my thinking is that it's going to be something about character development within Edward. Because what it says before those two sentences is, I am done with hope, thought Edward Tulane. And then, that's my signal, one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. When it says and then, that makes me think whatever was said right before is going to change. And since it says, I am done with hope, thought Edward Tulane, and then, it makes me think that there's going to be some character development with Edward where he's going to start hoping again. Or maybe he'll just find a really good friend that'll make him happier. I'm not entirely sure. The author didn't give everything away, but the author is definitely letting us as readers know that something's going to change. Chapter 26. I think that's the doll that was placed next to him. Oh, I don't know if you can see it, third graders, but this doll looks like she has a lot of cracks in her head, like she might have also been broken into a lot of pieces. There you are, my lady. Meet the rabbit doll, said Lucius. The doll mender walked away, turning out the lights one by one. In the gloom of the shop, Edward could see that the doll's head, like his, had been broken and repaired. Ooh, that's what we thought based on that picture. Her face was, in fact, a web of cracks. She was wearing a baby bonnet. How do you do? She said in a high, thin voice. Ooh, let me try that again in a high, thin voice. How do you do? She said in a high, thin voice. I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Hello, said Edward. How long have you been here? She said. Months and months, said Edward, but I don't care. One place is the same as another to me. Oh, not for me, said the doll. I have lived 100 years, and in that time I have been in places that were heavenly and others that were horrid. After a time you learn that each place is different, and you become a different doll. In each place, too, quite different. 100 years, said Edward. I'm old. The doll mender confirmed this. He said that he was mending me, and that he said as he was mending me that I am at least that. At least 100. At least 100 years old. Edward thought about everything that had happened to him in his short life. What kind of adventures would you have if you were in the world for a century? A century. Does anyone know what a century is? A century is 100 years. It's a length of time that's 100 years. Like a decade is 10 years, and a century is 100 years. The doll said, "I wonder who will come for me this time. Someone will come. Someone always comes. Who will it be?" "I don't care if anybody comes for me," said Edward. "But that's dreadful," said the old doll. "There's no point in going on if you feel that way, no point at all. You must be filled with expectancy. You must be awash in hope. You must wonder who will love you, whom you will love next." "I am done being loved," Edward told her. "I'm done with loving. It's too painful." "Psh," said the old doll. "Where's your courage?" "Somewhere else, I guess," said Edward. "You disappoint me," she said. "You disappoint me greatly. If you have no intention of loving or being loved, then the whole journey is pointless. You might as well leap from the shelf right now and let yourself shatter into a million pieces. Get it over with. Get it over with now." "I would leap if I was able," said Edward. "Shall I push you?" said the old doll. "Oh, thank you," said Edward. "Not that you could," he muttered to himself. Sounds like he might have been a little bit scared that she was going to do that. "What's that?" "Nothing," said Edward. The dark in the doll shop was now complete. The old doll and Edward sat on their shelf and stared straight ahead. "You disappoint me." That sounds like Pellegrina. Her words made Edward think of Pellegrina. I love when, as a reader, you have a thought and then just a moment later, the author has the exact same thought. It tells you that not only are you probably a pretty good reader, but you're also probably becoming a really good writer. Her words made Edward think of Pellegrina, of warthogs and princesses, of listening and love, of spells and curses. What if there was somebody waiting to love him? What if there was somebody who he would love again? Was it possible? Edward felt his heart stir. "No," he told his heart, "not possible, not possible." In the morning, Lucius Clark came and unlocked the shop. "Good morning, my darlings," he called out to them. "Good morning, my lovelies." He pulled up the shades on the window. He turned on the light over his tools. He switched the sign on the door to open. The first customer was a little girl with her father. "Are you looking for something special?" Lucius said to them. "Yes, I'm looking for a friend." Her father put her on his shoulders and they walked around the shop. The girl studied each doll carefully. She looked Edward right in the eyes and she nodded at him. "Have you decided, Natalie?" her father asked. "Yes," she said. "I want the one in the baby bonnet." "Oh," said Lucius Clark, "you know that she is very old. She is antique." "She needs me," said Natalie, firmly. Next to Edward, the old doll let out a sigh. She seemed to sit up a little bit straighter. Lucius came and took her off the shelf and handed her to Natalie. And when they left, when the girl's father opened the door for his daughter, and the old doll, a bright shaft of early morning light came flooding in. And Edward heard quite clearly, as if it were sitting next to him, an old doll's voice. "Open your heart," she said gently. "Someone will come. Someone will come for you. But first you must open your heart." The door closed. The sunlight disappeared. Someone will come. Edward's heart stirred. He thought for the first time in a long time of the house on Egypt Street, and of Abeline winding his watch and bending toward him, and placing it on his left leg, saying, "I will come home to you." Oh no, he told himself, don't believe it. Don't let yourself believe it. But it was too late. Someone will come for you. The China Rabbit's heart had begun again to open. Here's a picture of Edward. You can see the doll mender, like doll fixer, has really, really made him look nice. Our last chapter. Chapter 27. Here's a picture. I wonder if that's the author telling you something. I'm not sure what it is, though. I'm trying to think back, but I don't know. I'm not making any connections. Maybe you do. Seasons passed. Fall and winter and spring and summer. Wait, there are only 4 seasons a year. Fall, winter, spring, and summer. That means a whole year has passed. Leaves blew in through the open door of Lucius Clark's shop, and rain and the green, outrageous, hopeful light of spring. People came and went, grandmothers and doll collectors and little girls with their mothers. Edward Tulane waited. The seasons turned into years. Edward Tulane waited. He repeated the old doll's words over and over until they were a smooth groove of hope in his brain. Someone will come. Someone will come. Someone will come. And the old doll was right. Someone did come. It was springtime. It was raining. There were dogwood blossoms on the floor of Lucius Clark's shop. She was a small girl, maybe 5 years old. And while her mother struggled to close the blue umbrella, the little girl walked around the store, stopping and staring solemnly at each doll, and then moving on. When she came to Edward, she stood in front of him for what seemed like a long time. She looked at him, and he looked back at her. Someone will come, Edward said. Someone will come. Someone will come. The girl smiled, and then she stood on her tiptoes and took Edward off the shelf. She cradled him in her arms. She held him in the same ferocious, tender way that Sarah Ruth had held him. Oh, thought Edward, I remember this, that feeling of love. Madam, said Lucius Clark, could you please attend to your daughter? She's holding a very fragile, very precious, quite expensive doll. Maggie, said the woman. She looked up from the open umbrella. What have you got? A rabbit, said Maggie. A what? Said the mother. A rabbit, Maggie said. I want him. Remember, we're not buying anything today. We're looking only, said the woman. Madam, said Lucius Clark, please. The woman came and stood over Maggie. She looked down at Edward. The rabbit felt dizzy. He wondered for a moment if his head had cracked open and if he was dreaming. Look, Mama, look at him. I see him, said the woman. She dropped the umbrella. She put her hand on the locket that hung around her neck. And Edward saw then that it was not a locket at all. Oh, third graders, I'm getting emotional. Can anyone figure out why? It was a watch. A pocket watch. It was his watch. Edward, said Ibatoulline. Yes, said Edward. Edward, she said again, certain this time. Yes, said Edward. Yes, yes, yes. It's me. Oh, third graders. That was such a fantastic book. Oh my goodness. I'm wondering, can anyone figure out why your teacher might have gotten a little emotional and why Edward was, how she knew that his name was Edward? How did she even know that? He didn't have a name tag. Nobody knew he was named Edward. So how did that woman with that necklace know who he was? All right, third graders, that was the end of our book. I'm working on finding our next read aloud, and I will share that with you very soon. Bye, third graders. Thanks for finishing that book with me.